Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Guys, can I just very kindly remind you before we begin this evening's call that there is an awful lot of background noise when people are not muted during presentations. So can I please kindly ask that if you are not speaking at the point in time that you just make sure you are muted. A very quick reminder on how to do that. If you're on a computer or laptop, you'll see a microphone icon at the top of your screen. If you're muted, it will be orange. And if you're not muted, it will be green. And you simply need to click on that icon to mute and unmute yourself. Very straightforward. I'm not sure anybody is, but if you happen to be joining us on a mobile phone or a telephone, then mute is *6 and unmute is *6. So everybody, welcome to this month's call. Can't quite believe I'm saying it, but we're in July already and having our national live call, our monthly national live call for the 70-30 campaign. So welcome to everybody who has joined. Unfortunately, very late on in organising the call, we realised that the England footy match is kicking off at the exact same time as our national live call this evening. So I have had a few apologies from attendees who would have otherwise attended this evening's call, although not as many as I'd expected. Take from that what you will. But we still have a great attendance number and I'm expecting many more. So as we go along, if people arrive, please do introduce yourself. Again, just a reminder to stay muted. If at any point you would like to contribute to this evening's discussion, whether it be a comment or a question, please do make sure to introduce yourselves before speaking. Your name, where you're from, whether you're a 70-30 ambassador, for example, give people an idea of who they're listening to before you start. And also a quick reminder that this call is being recorded. So anybody who's missing the call or anybody who would like to share this call with others who aren't attending this evening, this recording will be sent to everybody by email in the days after the call, in the next day or so, and you'll be able to share that recording if you so wish. Fantastic. Listen, guys, I'm going to get going with this because I realise that we have a very busy call ahead of us, a particularly busy call ahead of us, and a really exciting discussion I'm hoping is about to take place. So with no further pause to this introduction, as you know, this call is centred around a particular theme, a slightly different premise for this evening's call to other monthly calls. We are centring this call specifically around trauma-informed schooling or trauma-informed schools. Many of our ambassadors are currently working on what we call a self-healing trauma-informed communities project, and as part of that project are looking at how to develop trauma-informed schools within their own communities. They're engaging with their local teaching staff and engaging with the schools and looking at reviewing current practice and ensuring that there's a trauma-informed approach taken where possible. Now, this is at the starting, the kind of beginnings process. So what this call hopefully is going to do is give our ambassadors and the others who have very kindly joined us for this call an opportunity to learn from others, to hear of what's already happening across the UK, because there's some wonderful things happening across the UK. And where we're not yet doing things within our community, looking at what steps we can take to get things going effectively and successfully. So, as I say, a large list of guest speakers joining us. I'd also really like to encourage people to participate, to engage with their social media throughout this call if possible, and after the call. We've created a hashtag, and just a reminder that we are at 70-30 campaign on both Twitter and Facebook. So throughout the discussion, after the discussion, please do, if we can extend this discussion beyond this group of us, out to the wider communities through social media, even better. So using the hashtag and, as I say, tagging 70-30 where possible. Very, very quickly, and then I'll get on to the discussion. We have a huge and very wonderful host of guests joining us for this evening's call. We've been particularly fortunate to have some fantastic people kind enough to join us this evening for tonight's discussion, including James Docherty from the Violence Reduction Unit, Hendry from Reattach Parenting, Brian Padden from Evolve, Chris Kilkenny and Ford Joshua Varner, particular huge thanks to Joshua Varner, who is joining us from Missouri in the USA. So thank you so much, Joshua. And Joshua's going to begin our conversation this evening. We're going to hear also from a few ambassadors, I hope many ambassadors in fact, and we have Lorna and Julie Cooper also joining us. So as I say, lots of people on, I'm sure loads of discussions to take place, lots of contributions to be had. So I am not going to blather on any further. I would like to now allow Joshua Varner from the Helias Catholic High School in Missouri, USA, on now to present the work that he is doing with his school as a school counsellor and also as an assistant football coach. And we'll take the discussion from there.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and hopefully you guys can see what I got here for you. Did my screen pop up for you guys?
Yes, Josh, it's just not on large screen. It just needs opened up a little bit.
Looks good.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I can make it a little bigger there. So anyway, I'm Josh Varner from the United States. I've been going to schools and working with other essentially anybody who works with kids, our children's division, our juvenile office folks, homeless youth shelters, etc. And I've been training on becoming trauma informed for about a year now, and just constantly trying to make my presentation better. But there's kind of 4 points I want to share with you guys on. I think how we present sometimes is even more important than what the information that we're sharing. We can have the best information in the world, but if we're not doing it in a very engaging way, a lot of times our audiences are going to tune out. And so I did a lot of research on how to present, and I tried to implement as much of this good into my presentation. So obviously we're just going to briefly go over this today. But the first part of the 4 things I want to talk to you guys about today was putting your presentation in a hero's journey. And that means all great movies, all great cinema, you have a hero's journey where there's a problem and they overcome it and then you get a positive ending. And so that was something that I built into my presentation. So we talk about a child in our community that had been severely impacted by trauma. We talked about the problems that he's having. Then we talked about the heroes in his life, which, my presentation are the educators, how they became trauma informed, how they're able to help this child, and then how he's able to be successful. The second thing I want to talk to you guys about was just having great visuals. When you look at my presentation, it's very colorful, it's very interactive, and that's really purposeful in how we did it because, all the research I read basically said, if you have wordy slides, if you're presenting information in not a visually exciting way, people won't tune you out. And the other part is people remember visuals. And so the more we can teach with a visual aid, with a great infographic, that's how I got involved with 70/30. I felt like they had the best stuff on the internet as far as great infographics. And I asked them and they said I could use their stuff. And I think that stuff really helped me teach complicated concepts quickly, easily, and in very memorable ways. We talk about why trauma informed, we talk about the ACE study, and boom, you see their great infographic. We zoom into the different areas and we make that stuff as visually engaging as possible. The third part is we want it to be super easy to understand. Educators are not psychologists, they're not social workers, they don't have PhDs in this stuff. So when we talk about brain science and stuff, I keep it as simple as I can. Because I don't want to talk about hippocampus and amygdala and all this stuff. I want to keep it really, really simple. Front brain, back brain. I talk thinking brain, emotional brain. I keep it super simple so that they can understand it. They don't feel like they're being overwhelmed. They feel like they can apply this knowledge to help kids out. And so I keep it very, very simple. If I work with a bunch of social workers, we might get into things a little bit more complicated, but I try to keep it very, very simple for educators. And the last part is individual learners. Anybody can get on a cell phone or computer and learn anything they want to learn in the world right now. And so when I meet with the group, I actually allow them to dictate how the presentation gets laid out. So for a lot of educators, they're like, hey, we get this is a problem. We get these kids in our school. They want tons of tools. So we'll come in here. We'll click on Educator Tools, and we'll go down whatever rabbit hole they want to go down and help them learn as much as they want to learn about a specific area. And the research I found says that hey, that's super engaging for people. That helps keep them helps them learn, helps them stay engaged, and ultimately we want to change their behavior. And so the more we can keep them engaged, the more we can get them excited about what we're doing, the better chance we have to get them to change their behavior in the classroom, help these kids, because ultimately that's the goal. So that's what I want to share with you guys today. And I appreciate you having me on. And I don't know if there's anybody has any questions about that stuff, but that's what I want to share.
Excellent. Makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Hi, it's Linda here. I'd really like to Josh to say what he does if the teachers ask, what do we do when a child is triggered?
Would you like me to show you that slide? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, please. That looks really interesting.
Yeah, so when I go to Educator Tools, what do we do when a kid's triggered? We go in over here, and then it takes us through it. Hey, we're going to breathe. We want to calm our own self. We want to model that behavior. You know, we talked front of the brain, back of the brain a bunch earlier in the presentation, but we kind of reinforce this here. Hey, if that kid's in the back of the brain, this is not the time to demand respect. This is not the time to have punitive punishments. Really what we want to do is be able to work on calming that kid down. So ask for help if you need to, you know, if you're in a busy classroom, if you need to get somebody else in there, but calm that kid down. Be aware of the tone of your voice, your personal space, and just understand where that kid's at. And then I really like this visual where it kind of talks about when a kid's dysregulated, hey, if we get overwhelmed with them, we're going to lead them into an explosion. We're going to lead them into a bad moment. And what we want to be able to do is the second graph here, where, you know, the kid gets escalated and we keep ourselves calm and we guide that kid back down. So we talk about how we have the power, you know, we're the adults. We have to be aware of our own triggers, our own trauma history too. You know, it's a good time to talk about those things, but it's our job to be able to guide those kids back down into regulation. So that's when I talk about those issues.
That's
Hi, Josh.
fantastic. Practical, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, my name's Duncan. I'm new to this, so hello everyone. I'm a primary school head teacher in Hertfordshire, where there's a lot of trauma-informed practice, but it's a little bit disparate. And I think similar to you, seeing the 70-30 campaign to me seems like a really good sort of emblem or something we can all link to and learn from, and potentially offer a bit more of a wider profile. And I just wondered whether that was other people's thoughts and your own thought, if it's appealed to you all the way from America.
Yeah, and I mean, I found it on Twitter, and I was like, this stuff is better than anything I've seen. Like, how do I take a super complex thing like the ACE study, and I might only get 10 minutes to be able to convey why the ACE study is important, what's going on with our kids in the United States, and why they need our help. And if we don't help them, look at how bad these outcomes are, right? And so I only get 10 minutes to talk about that. Well, having a great infographic where I can explain this stuff super simply and very quickly and hopefully in a memorable way. I really like the pyramid, you know, at the end, how it talks about how that childhood trauma leads to disease, disability, and early death. You know, having those great visuals, I think, is super important. Super important.
It's almost like once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. It has to inform your practice of your thinking being.
Definitely. And I've had, you know, I always print off that infographic and I give it to everybody that I present to, because I always want to like pin it up on their wall, and they're always going to be thinking about it. Hey, these are the kids. This is what the outcomes look like. I need to be a hero every day to help these kids be successful. So it's really good stuff.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Brian here from Evolve. I'm really interested in the phrase the thinking brain and the emotional brain. There's one of the, because I've seen all these things by different people, but to bring it in together, this does it really, really well. And there's another way that it's described, the thinking and emotional brain, by there's a sports psychologist called Steve Peters. He's worked with Liverpool Football Club, he's worked with British Cycling, he's worked with working with Tyson Fury, Ronnie O'Sullivan, all the sort of top people in lots of different sports. And the way he describes that is that you've got a chimp in your brain, which every time you come across a situation, your chimp looks for danger, and if it sees any danger, it's jumping up and down, and it's carrying on, and it's creating, and it stops the thinking part of your brain. It stops the thinking part of your brain actually taking control. So he talks about retraining your chimp. The book is called A Chimp Paradox. It's definitely worth reading, and you get a really good understanding of how the different parts of your brain get, whether one part makes a decision in one situation, another part of your brain makes a decision when there's danger, and that's what triggers a fight or flight. But a really, really simple way of putting that message across to children is a book called Silly Limbic, and it's about a child that's suffering from anxiety who has this little dog called Limbic, and that's exactly the same thing. It's the limbic part of your brain that reacts when you're in a stressful situation, which is the emotional brain. So both of them are really good. It's paradox for you to understand it, and I think for children, and the book called Silly Limbic, which is sillylimbic.com, I think. You'll find it on the web. They're both really, really good resources to get this message across to either staff in school or children in school.
Great. Well, I'm always up for learning and finding new resources, and this is another visual I'll use to, like, let's say I have a biology teacher and they really want to understand, a little bit more about the different parts of the brain and what's actually happening. I always felt like this was a good visual to kind of talk about, how that cortex is getting blocked off, and once we have that threat assessment, and you're not getting a chance to use that prefrontal cortex anymore, and it's all getting to your unthinking responses, those fight, freeze responses. So, but I'm always looking for better ways to teach it simply. I mean, that's always, I think, just so important. However we can teach this stuff really simply, really quickly with good visuals. I think that's super important what we do. So,
guys, can I just interrupt there and ask on behalf of Sarah Docherty, the name of the book, Brian, that you just mentioned there in your comments, can you repeat the name of that book?
Yeah, it's called Silly Limbic. There's a website as well, on the website is sillylimbic.com. And if you go onto the website, it's Silly Limbic, Limbic, which is the part of the brain stem, the limbic brain stem. You should find it if you Google it from there, and you can order it from Amazon or straight from their website.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything specifically kind of related to what Josh has presented on to either ask or just to simply comment? Anybody got anything they'd like to add?
Right, it's Linda. I just wanted to ask if Josh would be able to share it.
Share the presentation? Yeah, I'd be able to do that. I can. Sarah has a copy. I think I actually have a newer version that I can send Sarah an email, and she, I'm sure, could send it out to all you guys, and you can take a look at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all on Prezi, so it's all online.
Hi, it's Kevin here. I was just going to ask what platform you're using, Josh, and if it's Prezi, that's fantastic. Really impressive. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I mean, everything I've gotten from other people, and I saw a great presentation on Prezi at a national conference this last spring, and I used to do it all on PowerPoint, but I just found this to be so much more engaging, and so that's when I made the switch. I just think it's more visually engaging.
That's superb. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks, Josh. Very informative.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joshua, for your time, and particularly having joined us all the way from the USA. We really appreciate both the support that you've obviously lent 7030, but also your time this evening. So thank you so much for that. And the presentation, I would third that. The presentation is fantastic. So I think what Josh's presentation has certainly given us an idea of how we might present this information to people when we are engaging with them, particularly school staff. And I know that we've got a couple of ambassadors on the call this evening who are currently in the process of engaging with different school educators within the local communities. So hopefully that gives you some food for thought in terms of how you might present that information, both visually, but in terms of the content as well, where Josh is focused on content and how he's really broken that down so that, as he explained, it's very digestible, it's very easy and comprehensive, but there's the ability to go further into things if the opportunity is there and the wish is there. Does anybody else want to, before we kind of redirect the conversation, just add to, if there are any ambassadors joining us who are currently in the process of engaging with local schools on this subject, and perhaps have started this process of exposing them to this information, discussing a trauma-informed approach. Any thoughts on how you're doing that, or how this presentation, for example, might contribute to the way that you go on to do that going forward?
Hello, this is Lorna here. I've started doing some of that in the school I work in, and I've worked with the pastoral team, which is heads of houses and learning mentors and the SEN department, in doing a sort of presentation, a simple hour presentation on trauma. And then I've done whole school training with the whole school staff, where I used quite a few, some of the graphics around ACEs that we saw in Josh's slides, and that worked really well. And I used it as storytelling to try and get across the kind of approach. And I'm now following that up with middle leaders training, where people can come with particular issues. But that kind of thing has had real impact, just doing different groups of people and then the whole school staff.
I'll jump in if no one minds. So I said Hertfordshire's doing a lot. There's a few big projects that have been school focused. There's a lady called Jill Litchfield who is the head of a Bushy primary school, and she also leads the DSPL 9, which is designing specialist services locally. But she basically pulled all the money that county put into these DSPLs and set up an attachment awareness program, which was really exciting, underpinned by adverse childhood experiences, emotion coaching, understanding trauma, secondary trauma. That's then linked to the Rees Centre in Oxford University, and the Rees Centre, led by Professor Judy Seber, is expanding that project, almost funded by John Timpson, who's the high street cobbler owner, and he also fostered sort of 90 children. He's written a few guides in terms of fostering, and that again is about exposing. I think they're aiming for 200 schools across Bucks, Herts, to you could call it trauma-informed practice. So there's a few nice projects. Then the virtual school in Hertfordshire, a lady called Felicity Kendall, who's the head of that, has been supporting and driving in those sort of therapeutic models of education, where the understanding that learning and therapy are pretty much the same thing. It's based on relationships, and it's based on trust, and it's based on the thinking brain and engaging the thinking brain and how we do that. So there's some really exciting things going on in Herts. It's really important, I think, we connect them. Final thing, so I'm waffling on. Sarah Kingham, I believe, is one of your ambassadors and comes to some of these talks. She is we're trying to set up a sort of mapping of the practice in Hertfordshire as a sort of role, a sort of picture, as a sort of, what am I thinking of? Proof of concept. And if we can highlight, there's some simple sort of colouring, schools that think they're good at this and are willing to share, schools that are doing it and would like a bit more advice, and schools that have never heard of it. It would be a nice way of sort of bringing some of these ideas together. And I did talk to Sarah about the possibility of using the 70-30 logo, the 70-30 sort of focus to draw people together, which I think is exciting. And from what I see, looking at all your tweets, there's so much good stuff going on, and we just need to somehow get that conversation happening. I don't know what other people think about that.
Hi, Kate West here, speaking from Social Finance. I'm really interested, we've been looking at the sort of ACEs and trauma-informed practice for a while now, and one of the things I'd be interested to hear from people on the call is to, I suppose, well, firstly, sort of around where Joshua started this conversation, as to what the actual drivers or motivations behind a school getting involved in this were. What, who did you need to get on board, and what were their incentives? And then also, when we're talking about kind of change within the school system, beyond sort of anecdotal evidence of perhaps teachers having better or more pleasing outcomes with children in terms of their interactions in the classroom, who, or do we know of people who are actually kind of measuring this in a more systematic way, in terms of perhaps like temporary exclusions or other poor or better outcomes Thanks.
We have in Evolve, we're a social enterprise company, and we work in I think there's about 50, 60 schools we currently work in, and we were asked exactly the same thing about 2 years ago, and it was we were after some funding from public health. Excuse me. And the one thing they asked us was, well, how do you know what impact do you have? Well, how do you measure it? And actually, we didn't. We had anecdotal evidence, and we knew that it made a difference, but we couldn't measure it. We couldn't give facts and figures and statistics. So we developed a survey that's asked 4 times a year. It's all in primary school, and it's all the children's own perception. And it's done in 4 areas. It's physical activity and diet. It's emotional well-being. It's personal development and cognitive improvement. So it's looking at 4 different parts of them, and we have the children that we mentor one-to-one who have gone through trauma or ACEs or have problems with behaviour or mental health problems, and then we have an equal control group, and all the children are asked the same set of questions as a baseline assessment in September, then at Christmas, Easter and summer. And we're starting to show now, after this is year 3 of doing the surveys, that the children that we work with one-to-one actually have a much bigger improvement on emotional development, personal development and emotional well-being, slight improvement on cognitive improvement because the behaviour is better in class, so they're learning more. Not much difference on physical activity, but it's only recently that we've started to look at the science and be able to put facts and figures behind the work we do. Loads of anecdotal stories we can tell, but you're right, we need to have a system that's combined, that all the schools that are working in trauma-informed areas can come back and say, we had a baseline assessment and we've got a recent up-to-date assessment, and we can show an improvement of such and such percent. That's what the school needs to part with the budget. The schools don't have much budgets, and it's got to be really impressive to part with it. And unfortunately, it's not always the head teachers. In fact, it's very rarely the head teachers that have control of the budgets. We've got to go and speak to the finance governor and the board of governors, and it's them that make the decisions, and it's them that don't see the school working on a day-to-day basis, unfortunately. But you're right, we do need the facts and figures behind it all.
Thanks, Brian.
Brian, it's Linda in Reading. Can I ask you something? When you chose these outcome measures, were they already recognised, validated tools, and did you run them by public health before you chose to use them?
We worked alongside, we had public health, we worked with the head teachers of the schools we were already working with, and we were working with Professor Sir Al Ainsley Green, who was the very, very first Children's Commissioner, who's one of the supporters of our work. So with all them, they all sort of came together. And we've also mixed in a little bit, there's a mental health assessment for children called the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire. So it was based loosely on that. So we pulled them in from quite a lot of different areas. And we wanted the physical activity and the diet, because we started off as a sports company. So we think that the physical health and the mental health are quite closely linked. So it's one that we've pulled from different areas.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Brian, we have a message from Siobhan Quigley, who is asking if you could share the survey.
Yeah, I will have to check with work. I don't think there'll be a problem with it, but it is copyrighted to work, so I just have to check with them. And if it is, I can email it across to you to share.
Great, thank you very much, Brian.
No problem.
I wonder if I could take this conversation to perhaps a more practical level and lead with the question, who should be leading on a trauma-informed approach within a school? So we know, if we look at evidence base and where practice has worked and what the kind of key indicators are for success of this type of approach, what we hear time and time again is this necessity to have the whole school on board. that it can't simply be a matter of a few staff within the school who are taking this forward. However, there does have to be, with everything, an element of leadership. And so I wonder what people's thoughts are in terms of, particularly those who are, and I know there are people on the call who are in fact working in schools that are becoming trauma-informed or have become trauma-informed, who leads on this, on this approach?
I can start on this one. Definitely needs to be a whole school approach. Everyone in school needs to be aware of the damage that trauma does to a child and the long life-term effects it have. I did a recent survey, research project as part of a master's course I'm doing on health mentoring, and the research project was about the awareness of ACEs within primary schools, and basically there is none. Nobody's even heard of the term or the impacts of it whatsoever, which I thought was going to be the case. But part of the research was, if we had someone in school who will be working more closely with the children identified with ACEs, who would it be? Overwhelmingly, everybody, the senior leaders and the teachers that I spoke to said not the teachers. They have a completely different relationship with the children, and they should be just there to educate. And they all thought that if the children knew what was going on at home, it would have a damaging effect on the teacher-pupil relationship. So overwhelmingly within our school, because we have health mentors who work like myself as almost like a school counsellor, we were recognised as the best person. But apart from us, if the health mentor wasn't available, almost everyone else said teaching assistants, because they have a very, very, very different relationship. It's much softer, it's much more pastoral, it's much more caring, and they will be the ones that will be trained up to work on a one-to-one basis. That's what the feedback from the school that I worked in on when I asked them specifically on these questions.
It's Andy Saunders here. Can I come in on this one?
Yeah, fine, Andy.
Please do.
Okay. I speak as a school governor. I've been a school governor for quite some time, and I think the answer to who has to take the lead depends on the strength of personality of the head and the chair of governors. In some places, the head runs the place and the chair of governors or the governors support. In other cases, the heads are surprisingly timid and do what the governors tell them, and you have to weigh up which of those structures you're dealing with. Whichever it is, somewhere in a file, someone will have a school development plan which will be guiding how the school plans its whole approach to what it does. And if you're going to get the whole school to be a trauma-informed community with the staff recognizing that the youngsters have got challenges and need to be handled accordingly, the whole bit, then I think it needs to be in there in the school development plan right at the top, no matter whether it's the head or the chair of governors or the other governors who get it in. It has to be in the school development plan for it to get any traction.
Hi, it's Linda. Can I just say I agree with you. I was line managing somebody last year who got Healthy Schools lead, and the schools say they're overwhelmed with asking teachers to lead on different areas. But there is potential with Green Paper asking for a mental health lead in every school. But definitely you need the governors, and one of the best ways to get them is to give them the research that WAVE has put out about reducing exclusions, because many governors are so worried about the reputation of their school. They're quite keen to exclude children who give their school a bad reputation.
Okay. Hello, this is Lydia. I would agree with what Mr. Saunders, Andrew, I've forgotten your first name already, said. It's certainly leadership has to come from the governors and the head. If they're not fully behind something like this isn't going to happen. And I'm a little bit concerned about what a previous speaker said about teachers not being involved with this, because they set the regime, the culture, within the classroom, and that seems to me a little bit of a concern. So I think teachers have to be very much involved and on board with this.
This is Lorna, can I chip in here?
Hello, it's Alex speaking. I wanted to say as well that there are some schools that have a policy that if children are particularly disruptive, are interfering with the class, the school actually has a policy whereby they'll put that child into seclusion for 4 or 5 hours. And that really isn't the best way to deal with it. It's just get the kid out of there, get on with the lesson, and there's not really a focus on why that child is misbehaving or what the underlying problem is. So that is something that really does need to be addressed quite quickly.
I would absolutely agree, because it's about teaching styles. It's about the quality of how well matched the teaching is to the needs of the children within the class. So all of these things are within the remit of what is being a teacher. So not to include them seems to me to be a bit of a concern.
Sure. What I mean is these children are just, when these children misbehave, they're just put into a room for 4 or 5 hours.
Yes,
no one goes in there to see how they are. No one goes in there to check on the welfare. They're right, go and sit there for 4 hours. I'll come and fight them. That really isn't the way to be dealing with this.
I absolutely agree.
They're the hard to reach schools, aren't they, potentially? But I think it's Lydia. I think it's got to be everyone in the community, because otherwise all the hard work of everyone can be undone by one adult who doesn't understand trauma-informed practice and escalates the situation. If you've missed out key stakeholders, a lot of the work's going to be undermined. At my school, we've had to go through governors, teachers, parents, children, MSAs. Everyone's had to have the training, and it is in, as someone else mentioned, it was in our school improvement plan as the key priority. I think it's all or nothing with this.
I couldn't agree more.
And I know we've got Anne Ford on the call, and I wonder whether, Anne, you'd be so kind. I know that I've seen the message in the chat, but I wonder whether you might like to speak a little bit about what you've done at your local school around this kind of whole school approach in ethos. Are you there, Anne? I think Anne might be having a little bit of trouble with her sound. So what I might do then is just read out what Anne's written. I'm quite familiar with Anne's work. We've had a discussion around what Anne's doing. I just wanted to share that. Yeah, and I don't think your headset is working. So I'll just read out your message. You said, here in Blackburn with Darwen, we have looked at whole school ethos. We have created trauma-informed champions within the school and have trained ELSAs, emotional literacy SSAs. The champions include SLT, teachers, SSA, governor and office staff. I wonder if anybody's got any thoughts on this whole school ethos, but also having this team of champions who are leading on the approach.
I think the inclusion of office staff is really important there, because a lot of time the parents, when they come into school, if there is something that's gone wrong at home, it's the office staff who will be the first to know, and so them being trauma informed is really, really vital in the way the school can work with the parents as well. So that's one that I wouldn't have naturally thought of, but yeah, you're right, it's a really good point.
Yeah, I just want to point out that, a lot of times we're going to be in situations that aren't ideal, and if we can make an impact on one person on that staff, one person in that community, or they're out there trying to build relationships with kids and be that champion, that makes a difference too. So sometimes I love what you guys are talking about and agree 100% if we can get the whole staff on board. We have great leadership teams pushing this agenda forward. That's awesome. But sometimes you're going to be in situations where you're trying to share this information with even resistant people. But if we can convert, we can bring people on board, even 1 or 2 people in that building, it's going to make that school a heck of a lot more trauma friendly to those kids with those difficult behaviors.
Hi Sarah, it's Tina Hendry. Can I speak?
Yes, please do, Tina. Hi.
Hi. Obviously we're in Scotland and our education system is different. We don't have board of governors, we don't have virtual schools. It's completely different. But I do have lots of experience of working in schools all over Scotland. And I think it is crucial that it's a whole staff approach, because very often our children who are really struggling actually build relationships with the people that they see as least threatening. And often that can be the ancillary staff, the janitors, the office staff. And, you know, it's a whole system approach that allows us to build up the scaffolding to hold these children together while they're in school. When they're struggling emotionally, they're unable to communicate their struggle, so they act it out. And somebody used the term earlier, when the children are misbehaving, they're put into exclusion or seclusion. And I think we need to challenge this type of language when it's used in environment, because these are children that are in crisis. And if we are vocalising that they are misbehaving, it's not reinforcing the message of trauma-informed care approaches. Now, trauma-informed care approach, first of all, we must look through ACE goggles, and we must have compassionate inquiry. What's happened to that person? We don't always know, we don't need to know, but if we've got a compassionate inquiry, where we are less threatening to that child that's in crisis. Quite often when they become disruptive or distressed, we zoom in, and I've did some work in schools down south, and I know the practices are a bit different. And I was actually quite concerned that lots of staff were trained to restrain children. Now, often if you're trained to restrain, it can be your first point of call rather than de-escalate or emotionally regulate or take on that role of co-regulation. And I think if we are doing a whole school approach, what we must look at is actually how the staff are feeling. If they're already stressed, how are we ever going to help them understand the stress and the symptoms of that toxic stress from children? Because they've no space in their brain for it. They have no space whatsoever. So we first need to actually look at the well-being of the staff, so they're actually in a place where they can see children's behaviour through different eyes.
Tina, can I ask you just to expand on that a little bit? And perhaps give us some suggestions of how a school might start. I would assume that would be a very much a starting point in terms of beginning with the well-being of the staff before then expecting them to kind of effectively support the children.
Absolutely. Teachers are overwhelmed. They have so much responsibility, and it just feels like, everyone is just adding to the pressure. And I can see, I can't remember your name, but the person that, did the survey, and, the outcome was that they thought the teachers shouldn't be the people that do that. And I can see how that could be the outcome of that survey, because teachers are completely overwhelmed. And, for me, it's about not talking to them or talking at them. It's meeting them where they are, understanding that their job is really difficult. Not just getting in and talking at them. And that's why, the presentation we saw earlier was fantastic, really visual. And it's about engaging with staff at a level and actually helping them feel the impact of toxic stress. See, once someone feels how it is for someone else, they can't unfeel it. They can't unfeel it. So visuals, are clips, are really, really important for that. But it's actually about us, when we're doing that, giving staff permission to feel, because behaviour stimulates our own emotions. We have the same survival mechanism, we have the same survival, emotional and thinking brain, and we get triggered too. So we need to give people permission to feel and not, judge them, because they have been overwhelmed or they've reacted. It's about having that reflective conversation. Okay, that's happened. I wonder what we can do, should that situation arise again, to support you to manage that in a way that would be more constructive or more connecting for the child. But often what we actually do is demonise the staff member for being that one who doesn't get it, you know, who you know, demonises the child. But we should have that trauma-informed care approach with the staff also. It's not just with the people out there, because as we know, ACEs are common. It's not them and us, they affect everyone. So our trauma-informed care approaches must start with our colleagues first.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you very much. Does anybody have anything they would like to add to that before we kind of redirect the conversation?
Yes, could I say something, please?
Yes, please.
Hi there. I was interested in the conversation on who should champion this, and one of the things that I found very interesting in the webinar by Mr. Timpson the other day was his insistence on the children being able to choose who they wanted to go to. So whilst I agree that it has to be absolutely everybody involved in the school community, everybody has to be trauma informed, I do think also that when we're talking about children in crisis, they need to be allowed the choice, who do I trust, because we're talking about trust here, and who do I trust enough to share this with, and that might not be, for example, a designated person in the house system of schools. So that's all I wanted to say. I think children have the right to choose who to trust and who to share with.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And just to clarify, the webinar that was referred to there was a webinar by John Timpson, who's the owner of Timpson, the shoe repair company. And for those of you who don't know, he's fostered about 90 children in his life with his late wife. And he was talking about why schools have to be trauma informed through a national webinar just the other day. And that was a point that he absolutely made, was it's not about us deciding who the child is to trust and appointing one single person or two individuals within a school to be that person, but rather allowing the child the space to decide who they naturally warm to, who they can build a relationship with, who they can trust, who they feel comfortable around, and ensuring that whoever that person might be, whether it's the cook or the cleaner or the teaching staff, that actually that person is equipped to properly support that child at that time of need. Does anybody have any thoughts about that?
Hi, Sarah, can you hear me? It's Fawn.
Yes, Fawn, we can hear you. Hi.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Fawn Leith. I am a health visitor. I work in East London, and I'm very new to the 70-30 campaign. I'm just starting to join as an ambassador. It was very interesting what I heard earlier, very, very interesting. I just wanted to ask those individuals involved in the trauma-informed schools, how do you engage the parents of these children? I know someone mentioned that the parents are involved. Can you just mention an example how you engage the parents?
I can speak to that, Sarah, if you like.
Kevin, please do.
Yep. Obviously, the system's different in Scotland, but I've targeted parent councils and offered presentations on either resilience or a shorter video that I've used that basically highlight what ACEs are and why it's important for everyone to understand and share that understanding so that we can care for people in a consistent way. And parent councils are starting to show a lot more interest. That in itself puts pressure on school staff to look at it a little bit more openly and engage, because I think one of the problems we have in schools is that teachers are individuals the same as everyone else. They learn at different speeds, they're open at different times, and we can't expect everyone in the school to suddenly pick up from the same level. So we have to adopt a trauma-informed approach in the way that we expect schools to behave and work with what we have. And I think what the lady put up in a comment about training specific people, having champions, and really trying to build the culture from the bottom across all staff and not just teaching staff. And I think when we take that into the parent community as well, in whichever routes that can be found in England or wherever else you are, through school boards or even open meetings, then we start to create a much more holistic approach where children receive a consistent kind of message right through.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. And I think that's a really important point in all of this. You know, we are specifically looking during this discussion on trauma-informed care within schools, but we have to remember that the schools are part of a wider community. And you know, to a certain extent, we can ensure that children are supported in the best possible way when they are in the care of the school. But ultimately, that child leaves the school premise at the end of the day and returns to the home that they live within. And if that environment isn't healthy, then we're not dealing with the full picture here. We're still not supporting the child in the best way we can. So there's an element there in terms of we have to make sure that the whole family is involved. And I know Anne, again, in Darwen, I know that Anne's approach over there is very much around making sure that this is a whole school, but also a whole family approach, and that we're not just focusing on the child, but actually recognising there is a family around this child, and we have to encourage that participation and that engagement as well. I wanted to take us a little bit back to Alex Williamson's point earlier on in the call around discipline, and just to touch lightly on what a trauma-informed school, how they might deal with discipline and kind of how they might review that, what changes might be made in terms of the approach that they take when they're disciplining children. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Happy to come in again. I'll just say this very quickly and then Tina can come in. I put it up on chat a second ago. I feel, or I like, the Stuart Ablon and Ross Green approach, which is looking at behaviour or challenging behaviour as something that outstrips the skills that a child has to respond adaptively. So challenging behaviour basically happens when expectations being placed on a child are over and above the skills that they have to cope. And I think that puts us in a place where we start to look at what we need to do. Rather than shutting them in a classroom for 4 hours hoping that they calm down, we actually can engage them in backfilling skills that allow them to fit in more and more, and the challenge of behaviour happens less and less.
Tina, I wonder if you want to come in there. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, I do. You know, and I think it's important that we, you know, recognise that trauma-informed care approach is not a soft approach. You know, and that, you know, we need to help children manage, you know, their crisis. You know, it's not okay to hurt someone, abuse someone, or destroy something. But what it's really important to do is to think about the connection with the child before we focus on the correction. And you know, we advise, you know, and do regularly support reflective conversation with the child around the incident, not just a restorative justice approach, but actually a reflective conversation, and try and build in the work that we do around building emotional intelligence. Children often can't tell us how they feel, they can't communicate it, you know, and it's usually a feeling, or you know, that is a trigger to that reactive response. And it's about helping them notice that feeling and helping them build the skills to actually communicate it before it becomes a problem. And we try and do that through, you know, non-threatening, reflective conversation, building in, you know, whatever tools you use to increase emotional intelligence. We use colours, you know, all the emotions have colours, so we draw, you know, we draw a picture of the incident in colour, you know, so we create a story around what's happened. So we're verbalising it, we're putting it in paper, we're bringing the colour out, you know, and it's you know, the adult and the child, it's non-threatening, but the colours represent the emotions. And then we try and give them the tools in their bag to try and notice what that feeling is and, you know, equip them to manage it before it becomes, you know, destructive or abusive or hurting people. And the language we use during this as well, you know, if a child has done something that, you know, and they're not allowed to take part in something because they, you know, they aren't managing it, it's about, well, not saying you can't do that because you're bad or you've done this. It's about, well, actually, that's not safe, you know, and we're here to keep you safe. So the language we use during this reflection and when we're putting in sanctions is really, really important, because, you know, that is at the authoritarian side to, you know, that authoritarian approach to a traumatised child just triggers them further, and they'll just push and push and push, and it becomes a cycle of chaos. So reflective conversation, building in the work we do around emotional intelligence, is how we do it, and, you know, we find it works fairly well.
Let me jump in on that, because I think that's a really positive way we can all access schools. Because what I think you're all saying, people we're hearing, is metacognition. It's the ability to think through problems and use that prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, to rationalise, empathise. And that's number one on the Education Endowment Trust's biggest impactor on learning. And so for head teachers who are thinking, I've got to get learning sorted, don't bother me with the trauma stuff, this is learning. And if we get all the children engaged in this emotional understanding, this understanding how behaviour works, we're actually supporting their learning as well as the whole community be trauma informed, which is why it's quite exciting if we can get people to see it from those both angles, two sides of the same coin maybe.
Yeah, and I think it's about emotional safety. If we can create a space within the school that, you know, that helps the child, you know, get to that equilibrium of emotional safety, they will settle and learn. If the child comes in continually stressed, you know, whether they're late, you know, they're pointed out for being late, or they're jumping about in the line. For example, you know, I always talk about, you know, the child getting into the playground, and we know that sensory integration is usually delayed when a child has experienced adversity. So they can be sensory avoidant or sensory seeking. And excitement can have the same physiology as the fear and threaten or the arousal system. And because of their disrupted attachment, they don't have the internal capacity to manage their emotional regulation. So something as simple as getting into the playground in the morning, the stress of leaving the parent, you know, or the carer, has already got them at a level where they're, you know, bordering dysregulation. They see their friends, they run about playing tag, they're becoming excited, you know, their arousal system's just all over the place, and the bell goes at 9 o'clock, and what are they expected to do? Stand in a line quietly and straight, but their internal systems are in absolute chaos. They don't have the internal capacity to do it. So the head teacher comes out to bring in the line, and the first thing they see is this dysregulated child, and they tell them to calm down, which dysregulates them even further. Their arousal system is triggered more, the survival response, fight, flight or freeze, and they're perceived as defiant and not doing what they're told. And it's 9:05 and the teacher's got a full day ahead of this with this dysregulated child, and it all becomes focused on this behaviour. But actually, if we put things in place to keep them regulated, we'll have less of this reactive response or this sensory overload.
Come in there, it's Lydia again. A good number of years ago, we at my school, we had a system whereby we did not line up in the playground in the morning. Children came in over a period of 10-15 minutes, came straight into the classroom with their parent, so that there was a much easier separation period. I'm sorry? I'm sorry? Hello? Can I carry on?
Yeah, go on, Lydia.
So, you know, it is definitely about school systems are actually very important and critical in able to support children who've suffered trauma. And one other point I would like to bring up here is that, you know, it's not always the acting out child we need to be aware of, because they make themselves very visible. It's the withdrawn, depressed child as well we need to be taking account of when we're talking about a trauma-informed school and and making sure that we're addressing all children's needs.
Yeah, that's really important going to from primary school to secondary school. In terms of the children that internalise problems are the ones that you don't always would see as being traumatized. They're the ones that when they get to the teenage years, more
any transition actually. You know, I don't think it's just primary.
Yeah, but it's the ones that internalise that don't necessarily get the ones that don't show that they need the support and then don't get support when they get to the mid-teens and haven't had the support. They're the ones that end up with more serious mental health problems. There was a report recently that said something like 9% of 10-year-olds for girls had depression, and by the time it's 13 years old, it was 24%, something like that. The diagnosis of depression had jumped enormously in girls, but only slightly in boys. And it's they think it's because of the way that the boys will externalise problems and then get the support. Girls generally, I know it's very generalisation, will internalise problems, not be seen as the ones that need the support, don't get the support. So 4 or 5 years later on, they're the ones that have a much higher level of mental problems.
Absolutely.
Because I realise there's a really long and detailed chat going on with this call, which is fantastic. And I'm hoping that everybody is engaging with that and can see that okay. What I might do is take the key points from this conversation on the chat box and put it into an email with the recording so that they're picked up on, because there's some fantastic points being made. I'm just laughing at Duncan Roberts, who's saying that there's nothing more calming than his wife telling him to calm down. And Siobhan, who's saying there's nothing more powerful than a tea and toast in the morning. Absolutely. Listen, I'm very aware that we are running out of time, and I am so sure that this conversation could go on forever. But I'm also sure that there's some of you who are hoping to catch the end of the football match, and others who just want a part of their evening themselves, which I completely understand.
Hi, Sarah.
Yes.
Hello, can I add to the stuff that Tina was saying?
James, please do.
Right, thank you. One of the things I bring to trauma-informed practice is the first rule is seek to do no harm. And what I've recognised is in some of the work that I've done in schools with Tina is, and I'm not a school teacher, so I'm the young boy who went to school traumatised and who navigated school with PTSD and never ever got a proper diagnosis, and my ability to take on attainment was severely limited because I was carrying trauma at school, and that's a big part of the reason why I get involved in this type of work. So, but what I also always emphasise is, and I'm not a school teacher, so I don't want to be arrogant enough to tell them how to do their job. That's not what I'm about as a human being anyway. I care about school teachers, so I want them to be able to meet their own needs, and that way they'll be best placed to meet the needs of the kids navigating school. So that's what it means to me to be trauma informed. It's everybody's needs getting met, not just the kids. It's about the school teachers, the whole school approach. So I just wanted to emphasise that, because teachers teach because they care about kids and their futures, and there's an expectation that teachers are professionals and should just get on with it. But being a professional and being human are two different things. And what I can tell you is, if the teachers are stressed, then so are the kids, especially the kids with trauma. They're stress detecting machines. It's hardwired into their biology to find safety in that energy, and it's a massive trigger for them. If they misperceive the energy of teacher stress as coercion, they might tune out to cope. It's perceived as they're not listening, they might react defiantly or oppose authority. We only need to look at the report cards of kids to see this played out. Recently, I heard a world-renowned trauma expert, a man called Dr. Gabor Mate, describe that when we get stressed, it might be because of our own unresolved issues, or we're being triggered by the kids' behaviour. And then we move to focus on fixing them rather than facing their own pain. And I agreed with him, because I think we're too quick in our culture to diagnose individuals rather than diagnosing relationships. And often the kid becomes a source of your anxiety, so it becomes easier to get rid of them rather than examine our own heart for a relational solution or self-reflecting on what is it in me that's being triggered here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Very good point. And I think actually that the more people who like yourself, who have had traumatic childhoods, working in schools and explaining it and coming from a personal point of view, that the better for the children to understand it better, and also for any adults in the school. That's a brilliant point. Well done, James.
Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Welcome.
Thank you, James, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. Guys, I wanted to finish this evening's call with a letter from a young girl, one of our ambassadors, and some of you may either know this ambassador or know of her story, but I wanted to end the call with it because I think it's really important that we remember that we're talking about children, and sometimes we get very lost in all the research and all the fact finding and all the practice and the kind of principles behind these approaches, and we forget the reality. So I wanted to bring us back to that to end this evening's discussion. And I've had very kindly our ambassador in Stonehaven, Julia Morton, has allowed me the opportunity to share, or rather invited me to share her daughter's letter that she wrote very recently to Nicola Sturgeon in response to an incident which she unfortunately was involved in her school playground just a few months ago. I won't go into great detail around what happened. I'll let her later tell you that, and then I'll allow for a few comments off the back of that, and we'll finish this evening's call on that note. Dear First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, thank you for reading my letter, as I know you are busy looking after Scotland. I am writing to you because I was sexually assaulted at my primary school in the playground at recess by a male classmate in October last year. My body didn't feel like my body anymore. I learned what trauma was. A couple of weeks before this happened, I had my hair cut short like yours. And when I came back to school that morning, the same boy called me gay and told me to kiss one of the girls in my class. I told the deputy head teacher, and he had to write an apology letter. I never received an apology for him inappropriately touching me when I told him to stop. I refused to go back to the same classroom as this boy, but my head teacher wouldn't move him or let me move to the other P6 class. Why should I move schools when I did nothing wrong? I told my mum to contact you back then because you would be able to work it out. I thought you should know, but she said that it was for other people's jobs, like children. For the next 2 months, my mum and dad had to contact 12 separate agencies and finally paid my trauma therapist to explain to the Director of Education and Services how much trauma can affect my ability to learn and why it's so important for me not to be in a classroom with someone who has violated me as I recovered. My parents were able to get the decision overturned and I was moved to another class. I wish my mum had just gone to you first, like I said. It would have saved a lot of time and effort. The main reason I'm writing to you is because I want to fight to help girls stop being treated like dolls being pushed around. At School and Global Goals, I learned about gender equality, and a few weeks before about child abuse. But when it actually happened in the school to me and I reported it, none of the things I learned actually happened. My mum and I are now involved in the 70-30 campaign to reduce child maltreatment by 70% by 2030. On the 13th of June, my mum attended the cross-party group for the prevention of healing of ACEs, and on the agenda is trauma-informed schools. I knew what to do when I was inappropriately touched, but none of the adults at the school did, except Mrs. Glennie, the playground assistant that saved me. I think the teachers should learn what they teach the children so that they can make wise decisions. It would really mean a lot to me if you replied to my letter and did everything in your power to help girls like me who may not have parents who can fight for them and teach them how to fight for themselves. Love from Poppy Morton. P.S. I really like your confidence and hairstyle. So this was a letter that was written to Nicola Sturgeon very soon after the incident took place. And as you can hear from that letter, there was quite a process, quite an unfortunate and unpleasant process ahead of them in getting Poppy looked after and making sure that she wasn't re-traumatised and entering the same classroom as the wee boy. And they went through what was a very long and tedious process. And as was mentioned in the letter, Julia actually spoke on behalf of her daughter at our most recent cross-party group meeting to the Deputy First Minister, John Swinney, and read the words of her daughter in describing the event and how that's affected her. So I wanted to end with that letter because I wanted it to be, I wanted us to end with the voice of a child, and a child has been affected by this, and I wanted to highlight the absolute necessity that we have as a country and as a nation to ensure that our teaching staff, to ensure that our schools and our communities are trauma-informed and equipped to deal with situations like the one that we've just heard. And I wonder, before we leave this call, if anybody's got anything they would like to comment on.
Can I comment on that letter? Hello.
Go ahead, James.
I'd just like to say, I heard the letter when I was at the cross party, and it's one of the most courageous letters I've ever listened to. I just wanted to really honour that space to let the mother and the daughter know that they're reaching hearts and minds, and they will get the change that they're seeking because of the courage to speak out about what's happened to them. So I just want to honour that space and thank them for doing that.
Thank you, James.
Can I also add into that, please?
Please do, Karen.
And I would like to add to that to say that if it's not dealt with properly, then the after effects mean that there could be people dealing with childhood sexual abuse in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s who are really struggling and in pain and unable to get the right kind of help because they don't fit in the mental health system properly. It's very raw at the moment for somebody I know. I won't say any more just now.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you.
Sarah, can I just quickly say, you know, again, that was really heartfelt, and you know, you feel that you know the pain comes through the letter. What we would advise, not directly, but incidents that happen within schools, the strategies that I spoke about earlier, the reflective conversations, you know, bringing out the emotional intelligence that we're trying to build, we would also encourage that same method to be used with any child who has, you know, been on the receiving end of any abuse or hurt or damage. So, you know, the strategy that I was talking about is just not for children who are acting out because of their trauma, but also children who are on the receiving end of abuse or hurt from a traumatised child.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you. Somebody just asking in the chat if the little girl Poppy received a response, and she did. Just the other day, she had a response from both John Swinney, the Deputy First Minister, and Nicola Sturgeon, 2 separate responses. And she's in fact been invited to go and meet with both of them at Scottish Parliament to discuss how she thinks people in her situation could have been better supported going forward. So it has been heard, and I agree. She is a wonderful little girl, way beyond her years, and especially brave for allowing us to share that on this call and in a wider way. So I also want to thank Poppy and Julie for allowing us to do that. Guys, we have come to the end of the call. I want to just finish very, very quickly with a note that although we are doing fantastic things on the ground, we are also doing brilliantly on a political level. We have, as you all know or hopefully know, we have our cross-party group in Scottish Parliament, we have our APPG down in Westminster, both on the prevention and healing of adverse childhood experiences, and both meetings of those groups this month were on trauma-informed schooling. And as I say, we had the Deputy First Minister join us for our meeting very recently. Some of you on the call attended that meeting, as James mentioned. We have fantastic things coming. So on a community level and at a political level, things are really getting going. And I think the discussion that we've had tonight has really shown the momentum that now exists within the UK to take this forward. I think we should all be really proud of ourselves for doing that. And I would just encourage everybody to share this recording, to tweet like mad as you are doing, to share this information, use our infographics, use whatever you can use to share this message. Go to your local schools, talk to them about this. It starts with a discussion. So we're all doing wonderful work, and I just urge you to keep that going. We have another call on the 7th of August. For those of you who are not yet aware, we do monthly national live calls. The next one will be on 7th of August, so the first Tuesday of each month they are, 7 till 8 o'clock. And the next call is going to take the theme of ACEs and the criminal justice system, and we've got a fantastic host of guest speakers already lined up to join us for that. James, I believe you're joining us again for that one to talk about the work you're doing there with the Violence Reduction Unit, and we've got others also joining us, so it's going to be a really exciting call.
Hello, it's Alex speaking. I just wanted to say very, very quickly, and I appreciate I may have 10 seconds, there's 112 members of Parliament supporting this at the moment. If we can get 18 more, that means we have 1/5 of the House of Commons who have signed up to commit to support 70/30. So that's the challenge. If we get 18 more saying yes, we've got 1/5 of Parliament.
And if there's anybody on this call who isn't an ambassador, because there are some of you on this call who aren't ambassadors, but you would like to engage with your MP nonetheless, please do get in touch with me. We have lots of support, lots of resources and materials in place to help you do that. And as Alex says, we are so close to getting there, and we're doing wonderfully in that respect. So any assistance, any support you can provide to the network in that respect is hugely appreciated always. Guys, I'm going to leave it at that. I thank you all so very much for joining us this evening, particularly if you're missing the football for it. Thank you so much to our guest speakers. You have all been wonderful. And I thank you all for your support for 70/30. Please do join us again next month on the 7th of August to discuss ACEs and the criminal justice system. Thank you and good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Right, thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Good night, everyone. Well done.
Night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Just saying that you've just scored as well, so that's a really good way to end the evening.